Welcome to Top Stock Picks. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and here with you to launch this new weekly podcast. Well, we're actually in our fourth or fifth week now of it. Still relatively new, but it is really an adjunct to turning hard times into good times, because it's just been very difficult to get all the people I want to have on my show on that 1 hour show. So we're extending it to newsletter writers that are featuring junior mining companies primarily. Because that's where a lot of the action is now. We're certainly seeing better times in the junior exploration sector, and when times are good in this sector, they're very good, and so we want to proclaim the good news and get it out there to as many people as possible. My guest this week is Brien Lundin, and he has had a career that spanned 3 decades in the investment markets. Brien serves as president and CEO of Jefferson Financial. It's a highly regarded publisher of market analysis and producer of investment-oriented events. Under the Jefferson Financial umbrella, Brien publishes and edits a gold newsletter. That's a cornerstone of precious metals advisors since 1971. I can tell you I've been following that newsletter way back to 1971, in fact, and knew the creator of that institution, James Blanchard, way back many years ago. Well, Brien also heads up the New Orleans Investment Conference, and that's the oldest and most respected investment event of its kind. So really privileged to have Brien with us. Thanks for joining me today, Brien.
Great to be with you, Jay.
Always good to talk to you and to hear your ideas. And so maybe we start out by asking you, what is your sense of the markets now? You can talk about the markets in general, the equity markets, the debt markets, and of course we always like to look at the precious metals markets. But what are your thoughts in general about these major markets?
Well, Jay, gold is kind of an interesting market in that the near term seems much more uncertain than the long term for gold. Mm-hmm. It's easy when you look at the debt markets, or the debt that's been created by the Western economies over the past dozen or so years, and it's easy to see what the long-term picture is for gold, and that's up over the long term. It's the near term. What is it going to do over the next week or month or two? That's always much more uncertain and harder to predict. And recently, I was a bit bearish or worried about gold because the only things driving it were geopolitical issues. And you know as well as I do that these things come and go. The sun ends up coming up tomorrow, fears subside, and there's no fundamental reason to buy gold because some missile went off, into Syria or whatever, because it's not monetarily related, and that's the real reason to buy gold. It makes no sense to own gold if, in the face of some short-term political crisis, because gold is money, and you can't spend gold in that kind of a situation. So, and it doesn't. Gold's real value is as insurance against the inevitable depreciation of fiat currencies, and that's obviously the main reason to own it. But getting back to the near term, it was geopolitical factors that were driving gold. So I had a real worry that it was going to fall back. And even from a technical standpoint, there was evidence that we had near-term weakness ahead. But then Donald Trump opened his mouth, and it wasn't a geopolitical issue. It was a monetary issue when he said last week that the dollar's too strong, and he's kind of a low interest rate guy, which we kind of knew reading the tea leaves over the past few months, but he had never come out and said it so forcefully and so directly. And now we have what we really needed to maintain and continue this rally. We needed some monetary issue, some monetary concern for the markets to factor in to the gold story. So I'm very positive on the metal now.
Right. Well, it seemed to me, Brien, that all along there's been a lot of rhetoric coming out of the Fed trying to make people believe that the economy was strong and we would have higher interest rates, not because of any kind of manipulation by the Fed, but that the demand side of the economy would be strong because the economy is so strong. And frankly, I haven't been able to get there and to necessarily believe that. And maybe it's the people I'm reading, the David Stockmans of this world. But
Hmm.
but I've just never been a believer that the economy was as strong as the Fed was claiming it is, and that in the long, I mean, you would just see the markets move with some remarks out of the Fed, say bearish remarks or strong dollar remarks, higher interest rate remarks would
Hmm.
send gold down, and I kept saying, well, I don't really buy that one, but in any event, I agree with you. It definitely is a monetary issue, and that seemed to be the spark, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was last week the most recent spark for gold, and of course, in regards to the Fed, we know well that their primary motivation for raising rates is so that they have some breathing room above zero bound, so that they can cut rates
Yeah.
in face of the next slowdown, which at least from a time standpoint, is certainly overdue. And the other thing to remember about the Fed is that we have inflationary pressures finally building and hitting the economy, and the Fed will never get ahead of inflation. It really can't, because you can only raise rates so much in this environment with so much debt. But they're going to be reluctant to get ahead of inflation, and we're going to have negative real rates
Hmm.
for years to come. Even the Fed admits that.
Right. Yeah, and that's really what drives gold, I think, longer
Mhm.
term is this negative real rates when you can't get anything. I mean, I can remember very well when Paul Volcker killed the gold bull market that ended in 1980, and that's how old I am, Brian. But going all the way back there, I remember, and my first mortgage was a 17.5% mortgage. There was a
Mhm.
real reason to sell your gold and go to paper at that time. But it's
Yeah.
the exact opposite now. Well, what mood are you finding from the CEOs of the juniors? Because you're very much involved in analyzing and recommending and talking about junior mining companies. Are you finding the CEOs and the people in the industry pretty optimistic, pretty upbeat now? Certainly compared to where they were a couple of years ago, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I think since the market turned in early 2016, I think it's been proven that the trend is up, uh, generally up. We'll have the occasional corrections, we'll have the squiggles in the line, but I think the CEOs are are confident that the trend is up now. We don't think that the market's just going to come out of the uh, out of left field and slap us silly like it did from 2011 to 2015. You never really knew when the next blow. They were in constant state of flinching, because you never knew if the
Yeah.
any little rally was just a sucker punch
Yep.
coming, and it was, for 4.5 years. But I think they're also confident, frankly, because they have money now and they can get to work, and they know that they have at least 2 more years of a job. So they're able and they're more confident to put money into the ground. And we're really only now starting to see the flow of news resulting from last year's financings finally getting into the ground.
Yeah, indeed. It certainly is a much better scenario. Well, let's talk about a couple of the companies that you like, and I understand that a couple of them that are your favorites are also my favorites. So, want to hear what you have to say about Arvista. Trades in Toronto under the symbol AVA, and you can buy it down here in the States as I have under the symbol
Mhm.
ARVSF.
Yeah, ARVSF on the
Over,
OTC, and,
yeah.
and AVA on the Canadian Venture Exchange. You've been on this story a lot longer than I have, Jay. I was really fortunate at PDAC to have someone with the company bring it to my attention,
Uh-huh.
primarily because, and what really attracted me to the story was that there was a near-term buying opportunity coming up,
Mm-hmm.
in that the shares that had been issued for Avista's Due project they were issued to another junior company, and the junior company had announced that they were going to dividend those shares out to its shareholders, which they did in late March, and that those shares are still hitting the market
Mm-hmm.
to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
and that's created a buying opportunity. We've seen some weakness in the share price. It was trading for, I guess, 45 cents or so Canadian, and it got down to below 30 cents Canadian, and that was a great buying opportunity, I think, for the company. As you know, they have nearly 4.5 million ounces of gold in a global inferred resource, and even if you pit constrain that resource, that inferred resource, they still have about 2.8 million ounces, grading over 1 gram per ton in an open pittable resource. It's, I think, an outstanding company, outstanding project that's gone largely unrecognized in the market.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Certainly, and lots of exploration potential, I think, to expand that. You know, Brien, I sort of look at it as a couple of the other major open pit projects up in Quebec and Ontario. They're very similar, I think, in many ways. So we'll see. But still a story that's, I think, fairly unrecognized yet. Not a lot of people following it yet. So.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a buying opportunity right now. An exogenous event has lowered the share price, and it's gone on sale. So I think it's a great opportunity.
All right, another one that starts with A, Ain Resources, which is really a favorite of mine. I understand you like it a lot as well.
I really do, and you're very much aware, as I am, of the track record of this team with Sean Wallace and Ivan Biebeck. And the rest of the guys there, they had Keegan Resources, which, was a huge success. They had Caden, which was a huge success. These guys, and even going back to Sean's time at Hunter Dickinson, you're looking at track records that are unblemished with any scintilla of failure. And that's so hard to find in the junior resource market.
Oh, yeah.
And their next big play is Ain Resources, and they've been able to attract a lot of money. They've been able to go out and really, just as the market was turning, so they were able to still get really good deals. They've been able to acquire some projects that other companies were not able to bring forward. And the Committee Bay Gold Project and Nunavut, the Homestead Project in BC, and I really like their Peruvian portfolio. They were able to get, and I say Homestead, it was Homestake Project that they got in BC, but their Peruvian portfolio is what I was most excited about, and as it turns out, it's what I believe the management team there is most excited about. In particular, their Sombrero target has, in just the early work that they've been able to put onto that portfolio of projects in Peru, they were able to dramatically extend the gold soil anomaly for the Sombrero project. And I think it's already proven to be a world-class target.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Certainly, and one of the things, Brien, success breeds success. They're able to pick up, they're able to raise money because of their track record, but they're also able to get a lot of really top technical talent with the management team as well. So, yeah, I just love this one, and I think it's hard to go wrong with Auryn, but of course there's always risks in this business, but that's a favorite of mine. Now you have another one though that I'm not as familiar with, Tower Resources. What do you like about that one?
Well, I had looked at Tower. I recommended them actually in Gold Newsletter. I guess it was around the peak of the market in 2011 or so. Because they had some great exploration projects in BC, and I was forced to drop them from the portfolio as the market began to slide. But I recently reconnected with them because they were lining up a financing, and they had kind of reoriented in their project portfolio, kept one of their old projects, gained a couple of other ones, and all three of their primary projects were so interesting that they were able to attract some very smart investors into their financing, primarily Sandstorm Gold, which, as you know, is a royalty company, a metal streaming company.
Yes.
Well, Sandstorm subscribed for equity in the financing, but also paid them $500,000 Canadian for a 2% NSR royalty on their three core projects. And these are projects that are exploration projects. They have resource. So Sandstorm liked them enough that they were acquiring royalties on resources that right now don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, David Lowell, who is one of the foremost exploration geologists in history, with
Yeah.
many massive, monstrously large projects that he's discovered over the years.
Right.
And he's putting a lot of his personal money into this company after looking at their three primary projects.
Mm-hmm.
All three projects are in BC. They have some drilling done on them or some sampling, and I won't go into all of the details, but there's evidence in each of the three cases that a sizable resource is within. It could be found literally this year,
Mm-hmm.
as drilling will be accomplished on all three targets this year with the money that they've raised.
Okay, so they've raised money of 65.8 million shares. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
so selling at about 14, 15 cents Canadian, something like that. 16 cents I
yes.
see today. Yeah, TWR is a symbol. Well, it's one I'll have to check out, Brien. I'm not familiar with that one, but that's why we like to have people like you come on and give us some new ideas.
Good.
Anything else? Anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with today before we say goodbye?
Well, I think that you need to find these juniors and buy them on dips. As we said, the long-term story for gold is upward, and there'll be jiggles in the line, there'll be corrections, and if you keep buying on dips, pay some attention to seasonality. In other words, during the slow season, like the middle of summer, that's a great time to pick up these juniors. But just don't be in a rush. Don't chase the share prices higher, but accumulate on these periodic dips in the share prices and in the prices of gold and silver themselves. And over the long term, I think you'll do well.
Yeah, well, definitely in a bull market, you can do well. Of course, knowing when to get out is what I'm going to depend on you to help me with, Brien, in the future.
I think
But
we all can do that better.
oh my goodness, that's the tough one to know when
Yeah.
when the party's over. Speaking of a party, it's not exactly a party, but it is a good time at the Metals Investor Forum coming up on May 5th and 6th. You're going to be there, I understand.
Yes, I will. And looking forward to it. It's always a great time with those guys and a lot of great companies coming to that event. And, I think probably one or two of the companies we just mentioned will be there as well.
Yeah, looking forward. I think Aurvista for sure will be there. So, well, I look forward to seeing you there, Brien. And until then, well, take care of yourself, and we'll see you then. Well, folks, that's all for this week. But would like to remind you to go to jtaylormedia.com if you can go to this conference that Brian's going to be attending, and I will be there, and a lot of good companies. Go to jtaylormedia.com, click on the Metals Investor Forum banner, sign up immediately because I understand it is filling up very fast, and they do limit the number of people that are able to get in the door. So if you have an ability to go or a desire or able to make it and you're planning to go, you better do it fast, so don't waste any time. Thanks again, Brien, and we'll see you folks next week. John Kaiser will be with us, so until then, take care.